Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, wellbeing, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal wellbeing.
Welcome to the 288th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. Since the last episode, 287, released on the 2nd of September 2025, it seems like a lot has happened. And for me, it mostly feels negative and overwhelming, but as always, there are lessons to learn in the workplace. Don't forget the podcast is now fortnightly, but if you're missing weekly content, you have 6 years worth of podcast episodes to reflect back on. And if you want my handy guide that lists the episodes with a clickable link, you can get it at bit.ly DMPG23. Now, as I talked about last time, we were talking about handling conflict in the workplace or handling division in the workplace. And if you've seen any news, even fleetingly yet again, you will know that anti-immigrant, asylum seeker and refugee fascist protests have been in the news. And of course, we had the raising of the flags, Operation Raise the Colours, and now we've got remaining St George's flags and painted mini roundabouts across mainly England. So this episode is about what do we do with the division in the workplace, the now what part. And so many of us are feeling scared and frightened with the rhetoric, name-calling and emboldenment. And in fact, a senior NHS clinician told me this week that they were called a assumed identity word, F, swear word, by a patient over the phone, which had to be escalated to a senior colleague who then had to call the patient and have a conversation. Now, this is totally and utterly unacceptable and also soul-crushing to hear. The comedian Nish Kumar has spoken about being scared and how it's okay for us to feel scared. And in fact, he's been having panic attacks as he experiences PTSD from racist death threats he had in 2019 and 2020. He talked about how they set dogs on our parents and grandparents and how we defied them the first time and will do it again, and how we can stand our ground and we'll be okay. But often it doesn't feel like that. And clearly this fear and stress is going to be brought into the workplace, but how can it not be? Staff travelling to work locations, permanent locations, temporary locations, depending on what they're doing, factory floors, construction work, may see flags, roundabouts, racist graffiti, which there seems to be a lot more of, much of it coded, but it still feels very present. So workplaces need to provide a harassment-free environment. This is also a legal obligation under the Equality Act 2010 to prevent harassment and ensure a safe working environment for all staff. However, I also know, I'm not super naive, that workplaces will have staff with a variety of opinions. And there are many people who aren't necessarily about supporting right-wing ideology, but who feel a sense of pride in the flags and don't see a problem with it. So for workplaces, I can see it's about balancing respect for personal expression with the need to protect employee wellbeing. And this is something Aaron and Partners Solicitors talks about. And there's a really good article from the HR legal side, and I've included a link in the show notes. So I really hope you're enjoying the content of my podcast and want to keep up to date. If you are, then why not join my newsletter? When you join my mailing list, you'll receive my white paper on inclusive language and mental health. And that link is bit.ly ILMHCK. So given that this is such a tricky situation, what can we do to solve this problem? And actually, in fact, is it solvable? And yes, as a workplace, you can create, and you probably have, you may wish to review certain aspects of your policies. So maybe review your social media policy, and also thinking about how you apply policies consistently when it comes to freedom of speech, bullying and harassment, conversations, all of that. And interestingly, Essex County Council sent an email out to staff at the end of August, and they said to staff to speak out if they felt the word that was used was unsettled by the St George's flag and how it may be associated with anti-immigrant rhetoric. Now, this did cause some issues within the council, and I've put the link in the show notes. It's a BBC article, as some councillors or politicians felt they hadn't been consulted about this. And again, this idea of it's patriotic, there's not a problem with it, and many people feeling really scared about it. So I do recognise and realise that councils are in very precarious situations. And the other day also, York is going to start removing their flag, City of York Council, as supported by their local MP, Rachel Maskell. And this is going to cost £250,000 to remove the flags. And again, this is going to cause tension. So I think councils are in a particularly difficult situation. But I also feel there's a series of respectful steps that can and needs to be taken. So I think firstly is recognising the flags will mean different things to different people. but that the workplace is a professional environment where there needs to be respect to work together to meet organizational objectives, and how this needs to be acknowledged and recognized and talked about at a very senior level, and therefore right across the organization. Now, I think also if someone has never experienced oppression, they're unlikely to connect with the sentiment and feeling of how many of us feel when we see the St. George's flag. And of course, I don't think it's always easy to understand how it feels, or oppression, if for you it reminds you of barbecues, happy times, doing fun things, going to rallies, going to last night of the proms, whatever it may be. And sorry, I mean sort of positive rallies, if you like, or VE Day, VJ Day, all those sorts of things. But for many of us, it doesn't have that connotation because of the history. Of course, it's not the flag in and of itself necessarily, it's how the flag has been used. So it's that appreciating and understanding. And part of that will be the language that you're using, the language that's appropriate for your organization, and also making sure that that language is inclusive as possible. Now, of course, we might not know how people are feeling. So I would also say that it's vital to check in privately, ask how someone might be feeling. Maybe they were upset by the fascist riots last year. And upset, I don't mean to trivialize that word. I do mean that in a very significant way. And to have a private conversation. So if they don't want to talk, that's absolutely fine. You can say, I'm ready to hear you when you're ready. Whenever you want to talk to me, I'm here to listen. And I think that privately chatting to someone is really, really important, because often people don't feel safe. They don't feel psychologically safe, and they don't want to feel vulnerable in the workplace. And maybe they don't want to talk about it because they just want to get on with their day. The third thing is training managers to have supportive conversations, because I see a lot of information around go to your line manager and have a conversation. But what if the manager just feels out of their depth and doesn't know how to do this? We know that many managers are promoted based on their skills ability, not necessarily their people abilities. And of course, many managers have both, but training is vital. So train managers to have supportive conversations, whether it's around this issue, it could be about mental health and wellbeing, it could be about pregnancy loss. That's the thing. If you're training staff, managers to have these conversations, supportive conversations, it applies across the board, across a variety of different areas. And that doesn't mean that someone's perfect. It doesn't mean you take away the rest of the support, but this is really, really crucial. The fourth thing is around communicating, and I sort of number them not because they're in a ranked order, but just the way they come. So for clarity, is to communicate a commitment to creating a safe and supportive environment for staff, and also highlighting the channels of where to go for support. And that's really essential. And linked to that is making sure that there's culturally appropriate EAP services, and also to use psychological risk assessments. So we're talking about this at the board. We're training managers. That might be part of it, and also have specific channels for support, and they should be internal and external. And to check in while you're doing that, cultural appropriate employee assistance services. And then the follow-on point from that is we talk about physical health and safety risk assessments, which is great. And part of that might link then, if they're physical health and safety risks, to support staff in my next point. But psychological risk assessments to look at what's happening on the ground, how that might change. You might also want to bring in your staying well plans or your wellbeing action plans as well. So that could all be part of it. You might not have psychological risk assessments, and that's fine, but we can check in on staff, see how they're feeling, seeing what they want to do. And once we do that, we can also think about enabling staff to work at home if possible, if they feel too frightened to travel on public transport, if the risks are going up, because this is a serious risk for lots of people. And then finally, it is about facilitated conversations with qualified people. So people who are qualified in this kind of work and having these kinds of conversations. It could be mediators, because it's not always easy to see people's views. As I said, the flag in and of itself is not the issue. It's the way that things have been done. So this operation raising the colours and the connotations and the history. And if someone has never experienced oppression or feeling like an outsider or experienced hate crimes, they're unlikely to connect to the sentiment and feeling. And it's not the member of staff who's feeling vulnerable or in a difficult position's job to do this, but an external party who can provide this support. And as always, there's so much work to do, and it doesn't seem to stop, does it? But I do appreciate that this is big and it's a balancing act. And I think a lot of workplaces are running from this and feeling really scared. So in which case, seeking legal advice is absolutely the right thing to do if you need to check policies, procedures, conversations, what's reasonable for your workplace, That's really, really great. And I think checking in with staff, especially if you have a staff network, and this could be with all the staff networks, there is a connection to race, ethnicity, and nationality. But of course, lots of groups of people will be feeling vulnerable right now. LGBT plus communities, it can also be mothers, it can also be parents. There's a plethora of things going on right now. So staff networks, if you have them, are a really good way to do this. And a chair of the staff network is likely to be able to reach out more to staff in a sensitive and appropriate way. And training and facilitated conversations are also essential. And don't feel that if you haven't got the skills, you have to do them, because I think that could actually do more harm than good. But we don't have all the skills to do this, and that's fine. And that's where external people come in. Because, of course, creating a supportive environment free from harassment is not only beneficial for individual employees, but also boosts morale, engagement, and retention across an organisation. So if you're looking to foster a positive wellbeing culture and would like guidance on creating strategies tailored to your team's needs, then Diverse Minds is here to support you. So reach out to me to explore our training, consultancy, and coaching services to build a healthy, resilient workplace culture. Get in touch with me at Layla, Leyla, at diverseminds.co.uk. And if you've enjoyed today's shows and shows over the past 6 years, why not leave me a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from? And don't forget, you can leave me a voice note anonymously or with your name on SpeakPipe. And that link is bit.ly/SPKPDMP. And don't forget my TEDx talk, where I talk about the experience of navigating the connection between culture, race, and mental health. Again, relevant in this day and age, even though it was done 3 years ago now. That link is bit.ly/TEDx Wolves, WOLVESLO. And if you enjoy it, please share, like, and leave a positive comment on YouTube. And the resources for this episode are Aaron and Partners, Employees Flying the Flag, What Employers Must Consider, BBC News article about Essex County Council, and Thrive Worldwide, supporting your staff during times of social political unrest. So everyone, take care and stay safe, and I hope you'll join me in the next episode, where I'll be talking about future-proofing and what you can do in your workplace. Until then, take care and bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.